Hello and welcome to the second installment of my Tech Tips and Tricks Essential Series number 4 and 5. This is the beginning of number 4, and just wanted to say thanks for checking out the videos. Hope you enjoy them. Remember, this is a long series that are meant to be composed. It's meant to be composed of small lessons, digestible ideas that you can start stacking on top of each other and using in your own ways, or just using as a different way to look at things, maybe that you haven't thought of before, or reinforcing something that you already have thought of. Anyway, thanks very much for checking these out. I really appreciate the support. I hope you like my pretty simple box on the screen, because we're going to get started. Just for starters, I want to start with a very simple shape and just see how far I can get on it using detail only. And I think by doing so, my hope is to cover kind of just some of the basics I use when I'm laying in detail, and I'm literally just applying detail to my shapes and my forms. And of course, this is all in the context of kind of more mechanical, hardware-oriented thinking. So I'm just going to jump in and start adding things. Now, I don't just randomly start putting things in. I like to have details complement my shapes. So one thing I usually start doing is I kind of gravitate towards like the kind of the corner and edging areas, sort of off around the edges of each surface. I think this is an easy way to start, and it helps because it helps make your shapes look more fabricated and either more machined or more constructed or more engineered. Because I think in the real world, a lot of times when you bolt things down or when you put little hatches in or whatever, a lot of times they're along the edges and along the corners. So, just as a quick example, let me throw in really like the simplest of details just around the edges of each surface. And we'll start there, see how it goes. I'm just throwing these in just to see if the placement feels okay, right? Okay, all right, so I've got some sort of metal box here. A few too many bolts. Let's ease back. Now I'm going to do a similar pass, but I'm going to ignore the edges and the kind of the outline and the corners of all these surfaces. So I'm just going to start putting similar details like everywhere. And I'm going to try to do this randomly, but I've been doing this so long I might fall back into my habits. Okay, so a few random details, and I've ignored the edges. Well, I've tried to anyway, for the most part. So let's compare the two. We have ignoring the edges and complementing the edges. Ignoring the edges, complementing the edges. So in my eyes, this one looks, while it's not amazing, it looks a little better. It looks a little more controlled. It looks like, you know, what I think the first and the easiest thing this does is that you kind of register these small dots as either bolts or uh, 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 access points for bolts, or maybe like this down here could be a hole that has like a little clasp in it to release, this whole panel and bring it off. So it starts to echo reality a little bit, and it feels a little more like quote unquote kind of together. I can still add, things out here in the middle, but I think that when I also focus on, the edges, it just sort of makes the whole thing a little more believable. And it doesn't make if I put details out here anywhere just randomly, it doesn't feel as random because these edging, all these guys are kind of helping to make the whole thing feel believable. So I could have a panel just arbitrarily, out here in the middle. Sorry, let me do this on a separate layer so we can compare. Oops. Nope. Control Shift J. All right, this guy's on its own layer. So let me just do a cool little, little mechanical looking panel. Pretty dirty. Let's see, a little handle opening, some complementary, bolt holes, whatever. Maybe there's something inside here so it needs air. We're going to ventilate it a little bit. It's accessing the magneto coupling ionizers or something. Okay, so compositionally, this is dead center in the side of the panel, and I'm not crazy about that. That's a different topic. I'm going to get to that a little bit later. So just so that we can make this a little more visually appealing, I'm going to just bring this over. I'm going to offset it off the center. And this is more about composing your details as opposed to just slapping them anywhere. So we're going to get to that. Like I said, we're going to get to that later. Okay, so here are the more edge-oriented details. So we see what this looks like, and then we added this panel. So this is how they all go together. Now I'm going to kill the originals and add the random bolts. And now, even though here I'll kind of ease back so maybe this looks a little more I don't know, less kooky. So even though we've added a panel over here, this little guy, it still feels like kind of loose and kind of random. It's not horrible. If I had to leave these bolts on here, I think I could make the design work, but I would want to add some edging, some details near the edges to make it just look a bit more believable and mechanical, and sort of bring attention to the seams of the device. No matter what the device might be, we can usually see where the panels come together. We can see a little bit of the history of how the thing was made, and so on. So even though even though I'm adding a little bit towards the edges, like these all just feel sort of random and slapped together. I think that I like this version much more. So there's a couple reasons for that. Now I think there are two things kind of happening that are complementing each other. One is that my bolts and my details feel a little more organized, and that's not to say that you can't put details out away from the edges. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I usually like to start near the edges to give it a believable base and to kind of start defining a little bit about how this thing was put together, and just kind of getting the base coat started. So I can add stuff out here, and let me just add a little bit out away from the edges to kind of show you what I mean. So yeah, we got a few more random things away from the edges. How about that? Not necessarily random, but just a couple more floating things. Like I said in the last video, none of this stuff is absolute. None of this stuff is a law written, in stone that I think you can't, stray from. These are more, perceptions and guidelines. Okay, so I have a couple details. This is too big. I have a couple details away from the edges, okay? So I'll bring my panel back, and I think this works for, sorry, erasing on the wrong layer. I think this works now for more than one reason. There's a couple reasons, and remember, we're still in the simple sort of kind of groundwork, basic steps towards building up detail. But in my eyes, a bunch of things have already come up. This feels better than this for a couple reasons. The one, like I talked about, a lot of these are close to the edge, and they kind of just feel like they're framing the panels. And two is that even though there's a lot of surface noise, in terms of detail, I've actually got a lot happening here, right? But in my opinion, it sits well because I have a big empty space here, and a big empty space here, here, and here. So this is kind of one of your basic design tenets that you're probably familiar with, which is don't over complicate your designs. And that goes for everything, right? Don't overcomplicate your compositions. Don't overcomplicate your the design of a device, like whether it has too many tubes or it's got too many parts or it's not readable. I think the same thing applies to the your tiny surface details. So it's kind of like I'm still, even on the micro level, I'm kind of following my design tenets, and I am still abiding by some very simple rules. Okay, so we have detail near the edges. We have, big open spaces that are easy on the eye. And so another layer is that I have different sizes of details. So I have a lot of these small kind of micro bolts, or whatever you want to call them. What are the hole? I don't know the name of the actual, it's like the bolt hole. What's the hole that the bolt goes into? That's what I'm drawing here. So I have a bunch of these small ones. Then I have, let me change colors for for effect. So then I have like one step up. So 1, 2, let's just say this one's in there. And now I have like a medium one, just a couple, 3 sort of medium parts. Maybe these fall into that category. And then I have one kind of final big one, which is here. So all that is to say is that just right now, even on this simple shape, I have kind of a balance happening between the sizes of these details. So this opens up a whole other door. I could go on and on about why that is and what's going on in that. If this were, this is a closed device. We're looking at the outside plates. I have not like cut the I haven't cut the panels off to show all the crazy machinery inside here, and there would be way more detail. And I haven't started extruding things off of the surface to give it some dimension. I haven't if I'm designing something that needs to communicate a certain kind of functionality, sure, I'm gonna go in there and we'll make those things a priority for the design, right? But all I'm talking about right now is just kind of the simple exterior surfacing logic. And what's funny is, to me, a lot of these kind of rules that I'm talking about, in a way, they can still definitely apply even when we're looking at completely exposed, really intricate machinery. But like I said, I told you, I warned you, that's a whole other topic, and we can get into that later. But this is more of a surfacing kind of like exterior of your device, sort of how to bring some of these small things together so that the machine kind of sits, it feels completed, it feels functional, and so on. Or believable, rather. Sorry, not functional. All right, I wanted to go over one more idea or way to look at this stuff that I think could be helpful. So I've talked a bit about, how to get to this point, balancing your shapes, easy ways to start. I have another approach which hopefully you'll find helpful. So, I'm just kind of trying to see this through the eyes of someone a little less experienced or kind of new to this kind of thinking. And you might be wondering, well, okay, Joe, this is all great, it makes sense, but how do you know where to put things? How do you know what makes it feel balanced? What where the big detail goes versus the little detail and all that. And I don't know if you're thinking that, but I'm going to kind of address it hopefully rather quickly. So let's pretend that this panel here is kind of a 2D picture plane unto itself. And that's all we're going to worry about right now. So in one of my previous videos, I talked about subdivision and using the idea of cutting up your design into segments in order to be able to balance things out a bit. So let's just take this and divide it into thirds really quickly. And you can see that a little, in a couple ways, some of my details are falling under are kind of coinciding with this just a little bit. Um, let's pretend that I'm really, really good, and these lines are perfectly on the third lines, and these little panels I drew here are perfectly spaced out according to those perfect third lines. And let's pretend also that this was down just a little lower. Different layer right here. So you can see that, like I said, some of these are kind of falling in the neighborhood of these kind of natural mathematic divisions. I have these two panels are in these top 2/3, and this one isn't placed within either a third, but you can see that kind of a part of the shape lies, kind of sits right on that third, the junction of two of the third lines. So you might be thinking, what the hell are you talking about, Joe? Um, you moved your pieces first, and I'm not really sure why you would do that, but blah blah blah. What I'm talking about is laying out your details in kind of a balanced compositional way. And an easy way to get there is to sort of, like I said, using an idea from my previous lesson, is you can start with kind of subdividing the surface up a bit, lay out your details in kind of a balanced compositional way, and whether or not you use subdivision doesn't really matter, and then kind of applying that balanced composition to the flat face or the curved face. It doesn't really matter. When I say face, I mean like just, this surface here, or this surface here, and they don't have to be flat. I could be, designing something with, curves in it, and the details would, kind of act accordingly. But what I'm talking about is just engaging your brain a little bit in order to separate out these faces or these surfaces one at a time, so that it's easier to apply balanced detail to them. So back to my example over here, let's just say I'm going to use a little bit of natural, subdivision. I'll just do it in threes just to keep things easy. And I'll use just this really simple compositional kind of balanced breakup to lay in some details. So let's see here. I'm on another layer, and I'm going to grab a smaller brush so that, because I'm going to enlarge this afterwards. I'm trying to keep everything inside the recording space, so this is a little small, but let's just start from here. So I'm thinking, as I'm working on this big design, I'm detailing this one surface, and so I'm going to forget that it's in perspective. I'm going to forget that, this is kind of mentally what's happening in my brain. I'm going to forget that it's the side of a tank, or it's a segment on a, NASA satellite, whatever it is. I'm going to forget all that, and I'm just going to think about composing on this rectangular face by itself. So let's see here. This feels a little off, so that's over there. And I'm going to just start laying in detail that I think works on this flat surface just by itself, right? I'm going to try to have a nice balanced design based on these thirds. I can, make it as complicated or as simple as I want. And this isn't something that I do all the time, but it's definitely something that is always happening in my head as I add details. So instead of using the subdivisions to break up my big form, I'm using it just to lay out some details. And there we go. My Wacom wants to trip out every once in a while. So I'll just add some small stuff. Let me stick to the edges like I was talking about before. 2, 3, 1, 2. Can do detail inside of detail. And this is just sort of what it looks like when I think about this plane needing its own detail without really worrying about much else. And in order to get a good idea where to put things, I am just using kind of the natural, easy kind of subdivision to lay things out. Now, these have all been really even so far, so I'm going to use this junction here to add in kind of a bigger plate. I'm going to put in some details that are just complementing this plate alone. I know it's a little scratchy. Sorry if it's a little hard to see. I'm going to put a little detail in the detail. Here, here, here. So I'm adding a bunch of little bits around this panel, right? But I placed the panel kind of in a balanced spot, which is right over the intersection of these third lines. And again, this is just another idea. It's just another way of looking at it that I wanted to share. I'm not saying, oh, you have to make all your details land perfectly on these subdivisions. No, it's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's a great, it can be a helpful starting point. If you're really, if you're watching me lay these details down, you're just thinking, well, Joe, that's all fine and dandy, but I'm not even sure how to get started. This is just another tool to help break that barrier of entry. So I like that this panel is off center. So I'm going to shrink this one so that it's not really the dominant one. And see if I can kind of make my point by using the off-center detail as the prominent one. Okay, so now I have this little tiny baby composition over here, and all I'm gonna do is apply it to this face over here and see if it works. First, I'm gonna give it just a tiny outline so I can transform it easier. And I'm going to hide that. And I'm going to take my new friend and, first I'm going to hide this and this. Here. Let me duplicate, get rid of all of these on this face. Now let's see what happens when I bring this one over. And apply it as if I had drawn it on this face originally. So, I think that, I think that this shape is shorter than this one, if that makes sense. So the design got warped a little bit, but it's okay. It's not horrible. So I'm gonna just fix it just a little bit so it matches this bigger shape, just a hair. I think that since it got smushed, it got stretched vertically, it's okay to pull it out horizontally, kind of match the original proportions just a little bit. We'll bring these back in, and it's okay, not great, but hopefully you can see how, in order to put these details where I wanted them, I'm using a kind of a simplified sort of compositional thinking. Let me make these kind of fit the panel a little bit more. And I'm just sort of cleaning this up a little bit. And so for the placement of these details, I'm using this sort of balanced way of looking at just this plane by itself. So if you're ever kind of having trouble thinking about where do these shapes go and how do I kind of place them so that they don't crowd each other or they feel like they kind of make sense on the surface, if you're having trouble with that part, you can use this kind of a trick or a way of looking at it in order to place your details, or at least begin placing your details. All right, so I just wanted to go over that idea fairly quickly. Hope it made sense, and hope you can use it in conjunction with the ideas I brought in earlier. All right, moving on. Okay, moving on. I'm going to talk a little bit about types of detail. And this is another big topic that I want to talk about through these videos, but I'm kind of going to open the door to it in this section about details and surface details. So not all details are the same. In the last demo, I used a lot of sort of typical kind of hardware-ish, human-made hardware-like details. If we get up close to a truck like this, you'll see bolts around the seams, around the edges of the plates, small openings for clasps, some ventilated kind of parts that air can go through, little fasteners here, little things around all the joints and stuff. Lots of things that are recognizable, or generally recognizable. They were kind of generic, the details were, in my last demo. So I'm going to talk about how on hardware and devices like the ones I'm kind of flipping through, they're all different, and they're all different for a reason. There's a lot of factors that go into why the details look why the details look the way they do. You have anywhere from, anything from, when was the object created, how was it built, what's it for, so on and so forth. And then you have a lot of crossover too, which is, like you can find similar details on a missile like this that you can on like a piece of equipment like this. So there's a lot to this sort of subject, but I'm just going to sort of talk about it in generalities and kind of go over just some fundamentals of the way I see them anyway. So with that said, I'm going to do a couple examples, And mostly I'm going to separate the examples out by time. And what I mean by that is I'm first and foremost, I'm thinking to myself, when were these machines created? So here's an example of a World War II bomber. And you can see that when we get up close, the overall shape of this, the nose of this plane is really cool. And it's got this bubble glass bubble for watching other planes and targeting, I think. And you have this canopy up here for this glass covering for the shooter up here. Anyway, but when you zoom in, you can see that, like, wow, these are just strips of metal that have really been riveted together a lot. And and these tiny details are what make up the big smooth hull. So you can see the plates back here, you can see all these sections. And so what this says is, hey, maybe the machining technology is not as advanced when this thing was built. When we compare that to something like this photo, a little bit different. I can't see one bolt. It tells me, the sleekness and the overall shape, of course, tells me since I know what it is, I know when it was built. But just by looking at the surface qualities, I can see these panels that I'm not quite sure what they do. They're very minimized, and all these seam lines here are like geometric in the way that I did not see on that older plane. But then what's interesting is you see some rivets down here to say, hey, we're kind of we're on the same planet. The same people are making this technology. This is just a nice, much more advanced version. I think up close you can see some more rivets actually. But let me find another photo of this plane, which I had up earlier. Anyway, for example, I don't know if this is I think it's the same plane. Anyway, you can see the hull is very smooth, very tight, much more advanced. So, that's just one topic of So that's kind of just one factor on regarding how your details can communicate, how your details actually play a part in your design. It's just one example of that. There are a lot of other factors other than when the piece of technology was made. There are factors like what's it for? This is a consumer device that has a styling to it. There are no bolts, there are hardly any visible seams. All the cut lines are very geometric and elegant. You have a similar thing on this motorcycle that, up here, the person is supposed to sit. So, there are hardly any rivets. It's all very nice. And we do see the engine, which has a ton of detail, but if you look at the body chassis here, not chassis, but fairing, I think it's called, there's very little detail except for some construction bolts that look like they hold it to the frame. So there are lots of other factors. What does the thing do? How is it made? What's it for? Is it supposed to be aesthetically pleasing? Is it supposed to be have any kind of visual personality? So there's a lot to this, but we're just going to keep it simple now and just talk about the general idea of using your details to communicate, using your details to strengthen and reinforce your design, and using your details to that in a way that makes sense and is appropriate for your design. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so I have three. We're back to our fun, friendly box here. And I am going to do a couple different detailed treatments. And my hope is that I'm going to make the detailed treatments so different from each other that this box is going to look like a completely different device by the or piece of machinery, whatever it is, by the time I'm done. So I'm going to use something like this level of tech for one of them, just an old kind of World War II style, very almost industrial, lots of seams and everything and bolts. I'm going to do something a little more high tech, sort of maybe a little bit more advanced than this level. Um, maybe kind of this sort of feeling like a hard science-y kind of sort of slick feeling, and then but still kind of relatable and believable. And then I want to do something that I don't have reference for, but I'm going to try and just do something really alien, but still have it be machine-like and communicate that it's not something we've seen before. So let's jump in. World War II. Okay. I'm just gonna start by I'm not positive what this shape would be a part of, what bigger design. Obviously some sort of vehicular um, kind of equipment or something is what I have in mind, but I'm not sure what. So I'm just gonna kind of make it a generic sort of piece of hardware that would look like it fits in like the World War II era. And I'm just starting with some plates and seams because what I remember from that bomber photo is that it was really like the surface was really broken up with a lot of kind of squarish seams and overlapping plates. Okay. And of course, all the bolts. So let me just get the line tool, make things easier for myself. So I sped up the video a little bit here because I'm just doing really sketchy, loose drawing for a while and trying to figure out the design of this thing with the details. And at this point, since really I am making the design with details because that's all I'm using to give this device like personality or its look and figuring out how it feels, I'm really sort of designing in a way. So I really like to go, loose and fast with a big brush because I'm moving things around and I'm kind of I'm not really, I don't want to stay married to anything. I want to be loose and let stuff happen, and if I don't like it, I can just, kill it. I never just jump right into a clean version of something. I'll usually do this and then refine it once more and then refine it again for the final. If I need to, I'll refine it a second time, but then the final pass is just the line art. It's funny, the challenging thing here is not putting on too much detail and just covering the entire object with detail, because that's sort of what I was thinking about. What details will give this thing personality, but I still have to space them out and not overdo it and make it look kind of believable. So in my head right now, at this stage, I remember I was thinking in big, medium, and small bolts. I was thinking about the heavy seams and a couple places for ventilation. and maybe some clips or clasps that would keep the plates stuck together and closed, and maybe kind of like a handle or a finger hold or something to show that you can open this thing up in different ways. And essentially, that's mostly what I'm thinking of. I'm not saying that that's the only kind of detail you need to do an older, more heavy duty like World War II vehicle. I'm just saying that I was trying to limit my thinking with how many kinds of details I was going to put on it, because I didn't want to just go crazy and make it look confusing with too many ideas in one place. So I'm kind of doing a few things at once in this stage, but they're all done loosely. Okay, I think I'm almost done with this sketch. As you can see, I've kind of put a lot of detail on here. Maybe went a little overboard, but I think it's okay for the sake of the demo and to try and make my point. So the sketch is still, pretty rough, but I'm going to leave it at this state and move on to the next one, because I think this is enough for me to clean up a little later. Okay, so we have our World War II kind of, 1940s, sort of military machine tech. And let's go forward in time, and we're also going to change the type of technology a little bit. I want to do a little more of a scientific, kind of a high-tech scientific piece of equipment. Maybe it would be like used in a really advanced lab, like in the future for something. And so let's see if I can give it that feeling with just the details. Okay, high-tech machinery. So this is going to be a little slicker and a little more minimal. And if there are bolts and kind of fabrication steps that are still visible in the design, I think they'd be really minimal and not very obvious. I think the lines would be a lot thinner. The seams are going to be a lot tighter. The material would be, just a bit more advanced, so on and so forth. And a lot of the kind of insides would be hidden, I think. So first I need to kind of decide on what this thing is. So let's say it's an interface of some sort. No, yes. It's an interface, so it's going to have buttons on it, but it's not a normal computer or workstation interface. It's more of a, like, maybe this is in the back of the lab and it's attached to a big, really advanced piece of technology. But if you need to like interact with the machine, you can on this part. So there might not be much detail to add on this piece, because if the lab's really advanced, it'll be kind of a little more futuristic hardware. less nuts and bolts visible, and so on and so forth. And the reason I'm talking so much about like, well, where, what kind of tech is it? What gives it its function, its personality, is that I'm not trying to dictate exactly. Well, once again, I believe in it's kind of like I like talking about fundamentals and seeing things a certain way. I don't really think it's all about laying out explicit rules like if you design a piece of machinery that's made, after a certain year, you have to make it a certain way. It's like, you make the machine how you want. These are I'm introducing the idea of being conscious of how you add details, where you add them, why you add them, and using the logic of your design to answer those questions. Because, if you're designing a machine, hopefully the design will communicate its use. The design will, say a lot just by sitting there. Especially when we're designing technology and hardware, because it's really easy, I think, especially if we go into the far future with the design, like it's easy to kind of throw a bunch of weird stuff on top without really thinking about, what's and whys, and taking a step back and just giving it a second thought. So again, you don't have to do it like me. You don't have to do it the way I do it, but I would encourage you to. It's a matter of being aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, not just drawing something cool and moving on. Hey, sometimes drawing something cool is all that's necessary, and that's fine, and it'll be a part of your, it's fun to do, whatever. But sometimes it's worth really asking yourself, like, okay, what is this thing, and what am I doing as its designer? Okay, so let's get to the buttons on this. I'm gonna make an opening, so I'm gonna cut into the box a little bit, which is a little bit of cheating for this demo because I'm changing the shape, but I'm gonna do it anyway because this is my video and no one's here to stop me. So I'm gonna open the box up here, give it a little face right here that there will be buttons on. And did I do that right? How does this look? Yeah, that'll be fine. So the buttons are gonna be, maybe there's a small readout screen right here, and just some buttons or some touchpad or whatever it is. Just gonna do a little more fine kind of paneling detail, and it's gonna look like this when I'm done. I'm gonna cut that out. Okay, and let's put some more buttons on the top here because it's fun. This thing is meant to be, used. It's like walking up to a kind of a larger industrial piece of machinery and you go over to the control panel. Like even if you've ever been to a a commercial printing house. You know, they got those huge printers, and down at the end of them, there'll be this, you know, the control panel where you give it instructions, check on it for maintenance, and so on and so forth. And so that part is meant to be, even though you're on this huge, you're working with a huge device that probably looks like it does the job it does. There's going to be a small part of it that is meant to be interacted with. So there's, accessible buttons and screen and a small screen and so on. So that's what I'm thinking of for this. And the only reason I explain all that and kind of bring up that example is, again, I'm just sort of sharing where my head is when I design this small part, or this simple machine, and what use does it have? Where is it in context? So on and so forth. So sorry, I'm having a hard time talking and drawing at the same time. It's just the aspect of being aware of what I'm drawing while I'm drawing it, so that informs my decisions. And let's put a bigger panel here. I need some black. I'm gonna cut. I'm thinking, it's fairly sophisticated equipment, so the panels are maybe pretty tight. Maybe some conduits or something that are visible back there. I don't like how this is just placed randomly on the side. Maybe these need to be connected, so on and so forth. Let's see, maybe there's oops. I'm just, for the sake of the demo, I'm just trying to embellish this just a little bit more, because I think this kind of technology is more minimal, and I'm tempted to not crowd it with a bunch of stuff. I sped up the recording right here a little bit, because I sort of just spaced out and just kept drawing. I didn't really have much to add. But since I'm thinking about how clean and sleek this tech is, you see me just adding a few small little touches, and here I kind of decide that, all right, I need to break into here and let me put another prominent detail back here. So that's what I started doing. Alright, getting close to done with the sketch here. This is supposed to be some sort of exposed cabling or something back here, just to give it a little more life. Bring a little more of the mechanical functionality to the surface. Maybe a couple little more bolt holes for fun. Just for a little bit of surface noise. Keep the surface a little more active. I think we're getting close. This is just a sketch. I can always add more later. Tiny bolt holes, tiny ones. All right, let's leave it there for now. There's a lot going on. Hopefully it looks like you're supposed to, when I clarify these buttons up on top, hopefully it'll look like you're supposed to walk up to it and, you know, touch the buttons and sort of interact with this thing just a little bit. So we'll see. Okay, now we're gonna move on to our kind of more alien, super high-tech device. All right. Advanced, weird, alien technology is where my head's going. So let's try some stuff. Might be a little challenging putting on some really different, it might be a little challenging creating a really different look because I'm using a rectangular form, but let's try anyway. I don't know, it might take me a second to kind of find the design. And it's interesting because I'm going to have to make everything up that I do instead of use things that, like in the last demos, that I sort of know what they are and I know why they're there. You know, they're rivets and they're metal plates and they're buttons, but on this one I'm not quite sure what the device even does, so it'll be an interesting challenge. And I'm just going to kind of sketch and see if I can find some parts that look technological and sort of make sense at the same time. I'm going to try and add something maybe a little odd or organic to just sort of hopefully, I don't know, communicate or invoke something just a little more alien. And like I said, I'm not sure how that's going to work. This looks like an eye, even though I like it. I think I'm going to put it. Oops. Let's put it on top, because who knows? Put it up there. Let's get rid of these straight lines. Now let's go with this circular thing a little bit. I kind of like it. Maybe there's some kind of circular element down here. Don't know what yet. What for? This size of a detail, it becomes to me more of a part of the design. I'm getting a little bit out of the realm of surface detail, quote unquote, right here, because I need something else to help me feel that this is like some kind of alien, you know, weird alien design. You know, this big of a part isn't really a surface detail. It's kind of a feature of the design almost at this point. But that's okay. Still not sure how all this stuff is going to come together, but that's alright. It's part of the fun. Match this line up with that one. Cut them across. Don't know where it's going. Ooh. Use this one as an excuse to be a little more straight and mechanical. Let's put another large circle back here to kind of echo a little bit of what's going on the front. That's just a seam kind of a thing. Let's see. Still not sure what any of this does. Have I mentioned that yet? And I don't know, yeah, I don't know if you can tell kind of hearing me talk while I draw this thing out, but for me, a lot of what helps my hardware designs is knowing what it is, what it's for, and anything else I can get, like who made it, how'd they make it, when did they make it, was it made on Earth, so on and so forth. And with machinery, the thing about hardware and machinery is that it's the ultimate principle of form follows function incarnate. And that's because there's nothing on a machine that's superfluous or unnecessary. The machine is built for a reason, therefore everything in it and on it is there for a reason and can probably communicate like what the machine does. Just look at a tractor or an excavator, for example, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The giant, scoop on the end of the tractor, or the arm, is meant for, shoveling dirt and moving heavy things out of the way, and there's really not much else to it. There's a place for the guy to sit, while he's driving the thing, and there's a big ass motor on the back, and that's pretty much it. So when I'm sitting here trying to invent shapes in my mind and make a mechanical design work on a lot of levels, starting at the functionality and why does this thing even exist, is like a very easy place to start for me. And I think really where I'm going with all this is that the surface details, even though they can be really small and you only kind of do them at the end, the surface details totally fall into that category. They totally complement. The surface details follow those rules as well. There's no reason to design a really cool, functional, or neat looking machine, whether it's a gun or a piece of mining equipment in the future, or a solar ship for space travel, anything. No matter what you're doing, it doesn't mean the surface details should be random. You shouldn't be able to just slap on arbitrary surface details, because they're going to affect the design. Because why? Those surface details are there for a reason. Because the machines are built, they're made They are not, random objects. Okay, that's the end of that little speech. So, still not exactly sure what's going on here, but getting a little farther along. Trying to keep adding stuff without making it too busy. I'm trying to give it kind of a weird alien feeling without losing the fact that it's a piece of hardware. I'm not sure if all those intentions are coming together successfully, but doesn't mean I'm not going to try. Just going to do some geometric patterning down here to see if it helps. Let's see. Boom, boom. That's right, yeah. It doesn't really match anything else. It's a little too kind of weird and spiky. That's the other thing with alien stuff or non-human stuff is, the patterning and the recognizable kind of elements. You need to make them up, and it can be tricky. Same too for, I think if you're trying to be really deliberate, but you're designing something that, supposed to have never been seen before, like something really, really futuristic or advanced. It's a fine line that you walk when you're designing something that should communicate its functionality, but that you've never seen it before, and its functionality is something that doesn't exist yet. God, what am I thinking? I'm thinking of Spock's ship as a design of a spaceship. I forget who did it, but in the first Star Trek reboot, the character Spock, I forget what he was doing in the story, but he was flying around on his own ship, and it was a Vulcan craft that went faster than light, I forget, but it was so different. It was like the cockpit was spherical, and the body of the ship, like, I forget how it worked, but it sort of spun around the sphere or something crazy like that, and it was so different. I remember when I watched the movie, it was so different, but for some reason it felt right, and the machine just sort of looked like it worked and it had a function. And I just remember enjoying that so much, is that it looked convincing, but it was something I had literally never seen before. And I don't know if you're listening to this and you haven't seen the first Star Trek reboot, go check it out and maybe keep an eye out for that ship. Or if you have seen it, try and think about what I'm talking about. I think it was a white ship, and it was what Spock carried the red stuff around in, the antimatter or whatever it was. But anyway, I digress. It's just a great ship design that is an example of what I'm talking about, like making up something new that still like really did its part well in the story, and really kind of communicated its use and its functionality just by being on the screen, and really unique shape and something we had never seen before, but still did its job as a mechanical design. So I don't think it's easy to do all those things at the same time in a design. It's tricky stuff. Okay, I'm gonna leave this sketch where it is. I think it's in the neighborhood, and let's talk about all three of these together and see if I was able to pull off my objective. So here we have our three examples. This is the first one that is supposed to be a World War II era, hunk of machinery. It's all covered up with plates and bolts. Still pretty loose, but you can get the feeling of it from the sketch. And the second one is kind of our more high-tech, high-end computer from the future. It doesn't have a nice fancy computer terminal. It's just got a little bit of an access panel, control panel right here. And lastly, we have kind of more oddball, futuristic, alien technology. As you can see, that just by using surface detail, we have three pretty different designs that look like they do very different things. And all I did was treat the surfaces differently. Okay, I have gone ahead and cleaned up a couple of these examples. I did the older World War II box and the higher tech, little more advanced computer terminal thing. So just so you can see the difference between the sketch and the cleaned up version, let me just turn that on. So there was the doodle or the sketch that I recorded, and I cleaned it up into that. So I don't think I changed very much. I actually left a couple things out, but it's generally the same thing. And I'll do the same for the high-tech computer. Here was the sketch, and I added the part back here, thinking, oh, maybe this could be more interesting. How could I continue adding detail and not leave the box so plain? So I cleaned it up, and it looks like this. Very, very simple, very quick. Just going in and doing some line drawing. And with this one, I had all my line drawings on one layer, and all I did was I came over to the layer palette, and on my lines I added sorry, one sec. I flattened it all, but I added a layer effect onto my line art that I'll give you a quick example just so you know how I added those little details. So if this was, this is a layer with my line art, I added a layer effect with bevel emboss on it, and I just left it on pillow emboss, and played with the settings until the lines looked right, like that. And then once you're done with that, you can turn the effect into its own layer and then further manipulate it. So anyway, I just wanted to be clear about how I got to this point. Nothing really fancy. So back to the original idea, which is that just by giving this same overall shape, different surface detail treatment, I have what feel like two pretty different designs, and two designs that communicate totally different things. They show different purposes mechanically. I'm even helping the narrative or the story, if you will, with just the surface details. There's no question that this is thicker plates of metal and old technology and, heavy bolts. And there's no question that this is made later in the future. And, it looks advanced, but you can still use it because there are buttons. And so there's a broad range of possibilities you can reach with just using detail. And really, I think what I hope the takeaway is from this section is that don't stop designing and don't stop being deliberate even when you're doing surface details. And so if you are being intentional and laying your details out along edges and kind of containing where certain details are and not just putting them all over the place for no reason. You're balancing the layouts, you're treating your details almost like small, compositions, as well as using the appropriate style of details, being conscious of what you're doing and why. What is it that you're communicating with your details? I think that you can get really far in using your details to really good effect. So I think that sums up our surface detail section. I hope that this has given you a few things to think about, and I hope you enjoyed my funny explanations and maybe even ramblings, maybe. But as always, my goal is to not give you concrete rules to go by. You don't have to do it my way. You can try it my way, but more of things that I think are valuable to consider, and things that I think also, ideas that I also think help you get into a mind frame around certain aspects of technical design like this. So it's tools, not instructions. I hope is at least the way it's coming across. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and I'm gonna see you on the next one.